I mean, look, folks, if we're going to talk about bisexuality, there really needs to be two people in this conversation.
Really?
The real kicker of it is, I'm going to leave your reaction to that in the video. Hey, everybody! So, we're up to this month's conversation about representation of LGBTQ plus characters in media. And as I have done at this point already with asexuals, and as I will do again with other sexualities, in talking about representation of a specific sliver of that whole rainbow of options, I have brought someone who identifies as such. So, most of you should know my partner Liz.
Hi, everyone.
We're going to talk about representation of bisexuals.
Woo!
But yeah, I suppose just like, I think most people know what bisexual means, but for the sake of clarity, let's define our terms. Do you want it?
I would say there are people who are attracted to both men and women, possibly non-binary as well.
Yeah, I mean, strictly speaking, bisexual means attracted to two genders. Now, typically that would be male and female. Maybe it's female and non-binary. Maybe it's, it could, but the textbook definition is that. Now, that said, we are kind of going to spill over a little bit into pansexual, because I think there's a lot of depictions don't really distinguish, and I don't think I'm going to be able to find enough that is explicitly pansexual to be able to devote a video to just that. Mm-hmm. And for the sake of clarification, generally when people say pansexual, what that means is the attraction is not determined by the physical sexual characteristics of the partner. They have an attraction to a person, and the physical mechanics are incidental, and they'll roll with whatever that happens to be. There's also, and we'll get to this with at least one of the people we're going to talk about, there's also omnisexual, which is an active attraction to virtually everything. It's more of a thing in fiction than it is in reality, but conceptually, pansexual is my attractions aren't determined by someone's physical sex characteristics. Omnisexual is my attractions are determined by your physical sex characteristics, but I find all of them attractive.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I think that's enough terms.
I really always feel a little uncomfortable trying to define things, because I'm like, well, this is what I think the definition.
I mean, that's also the other. A lot of these are kind of fluid concepts and terms, but broadly speaking, these are the concepts as I understand them. And I'm the one who gave the definitions. So if you take issue with the definitions, come at me. I can take it. Leave her out of it.
I mean, I could probably take it too. I just, I hesitate a lot of the time to because I think people definitely, whenever it's a very important label for them or identity for them, defining it, you get into a gray area.
Fair enough. So I'm looking down at how many pages of notes do you have?
It's 2 and a bit.
Okay. You're the one who did a heck of a lot more research than I did.
I didn't do that much research. I just
said a heck of a lot more than I did.
Okay.
Not a heck of a lot in a vacuum, but just a lot more than me. Why don't we talk about some of the tropes that come with bisexual representation? When you're talking any representation, it tends to bring certain baggage and certain tropes.
Oh yeah, and there
certain
are
tropes along with them.
There's a lot of them. Most of them are not great. So there's bisexuality, where it's there and represented in terms of for male gaze or exploitation.
Yeah. So these would be your instances where it's pretty much always a woman who is the bisexual in a case like this.
Yes.
And it's always because a girl kissing a girl is sexy.
Yeah. So, I mean, even the song, I Kissed a Girl, Katy Perry song, is a great example of that.
Legit.
And I almost hesitate to call it bisexuality, too, because it's there for specifically.
I mean, it's
the male gaze.
Yeah,
or
it's
exploitation.
It's performative. It's performative bisexuality.
Sexuality, yeah.
And it may or may not be legitimate, but the purpose of it, either from the person doing it or the writer who wrote it in and the director or whoever, somebody is doing it for the sake of a male audience, regardless of how rooted it is
or just
in reality.
Like, ooh, kind of.
Yeah. So like this is your oh god, I forgot what was the. It was Wild Things. It was Wild Things.
I never saw
Denise
that.
Richards and yeah, it's very much that. Or our Basic Instinct actually. That'd be a really good fit for that.
Which works in another trope that we'll get to as well.
Oh yeah, that one's a smorgasbord of. Of baggage.
Yes. So, and I've never seen Basic Instinct, so if you have, I'll let you talk more about it. But I know enough about the character to place it in various tropes. So, it happens not frequently, but it's happened a couple times on teen shows. I would put on the OC Marissa's brief fling with a woman as an example of it. There's a kiss between the two main female characters on Riverdale in the first season, which is very much...
I'm a little surprised to hear Riverdale come up. Not because I've heard amazing things about Riverdale. I haven't. But because, honestly, that is one that strikes me as one that we don't see very much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it was a couple of years ago. I was kind of like, really?
Yeah, because that's the kind of thing that...
But it was very much a performative kiss. And it wasn't necessarily in front of the boys, but it was a performative, and it's on a teen's show, so I'm like, yeah, okay, I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
And they have had better representation since then, but it was like, it might have been the first episode, and I was like, oh.
that's a rough start.
Yeah, so...
I mean, but like, I think overall we don't see too much of that sort of thing anymore because it is so nakedly exploitative. It gets called out pretty readily here. So unless, I mean, granted, it's not a new movie, but unless you get something like a Basic Instinct that is just so reveling in being exploitative by its nature, I don't think that's something that you see unironically anymore.
So let's go to the other thing I put. Is her name Catherine, the Basic Instinct character?
I think so. Just say Sharon Stone.
Sharon Stone's character. So the other trope that I put her in for bisexuals is villains. Villainous characters.
Bisexual villains is, yeah, that's kind of a big one.
So I have not seen House of Cards, but Frank Underwood would fall into that. Barbara Keene on Gotham, as much as you love her.
I love Barbara to death, but yes,
like
she does fit this.
Bisexual villain.
Oh yeah, she fits it.
I read articles where they talked about, like True Blood, and they talked about Oz. And yes, they're villains, but I also am like, those shows kind of lend themselves to villainous characters anyways. Whenever you're talking about a vampire show or a prison show.
There's shows that are inherently about bad people. That's like kind of the whole thing.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of moral gray area anyways. So I'm kind of like, yes, you're right, but there's just going to be a higher percentage of everyone is evil anyway. So... I don't know. So I'm less apt to use those.
But I mean, talking about the trope in general, I think part of this often comes down to the fact that, and I don't know if you have this on your list of tropes, but bisexuality often comes with sort of a general concept, usually a misunderstanding, that it is a hedonistic instinct.
Yeah, I have a whole category of promiscuity, which I had to overflow as I thought of more examples.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the promiscuity can be handled by itself, but I do think there is a bleed over between that and the villain element.
Yes. I put them together for a reason.
Yeah. And I think the reason for that is, like I said, I think there is a misconception, probably still fairly heavily, that they're bisexual because they just can't get enough from one gender, so they go to the other one as well. And if you tie it to a hedonistic instinct, that's generally something that's frowned upon, so you're going to tag that to a villainous character. And I think that's a fair part of why we see it. Although, I think the femme fatale might almost be its own thing, where it's like, oh, now we really can't trust this woman.
because she's bisexual.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in that category of promiscuity
That's
and hedonism, that's a big one.
lot of names.
So we have Oberyn and Ilaria on Game of Thrones.
Yep.
Kalinda on The Good Wife, who I really enjoyed her on The Good Wife, but she probably fits that trope. You have Beau, the main character in Lost Girl.
Yep.
Frankenfurter from...
Oh, yeah. Who also can bleed, arguably, into villain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bleed over. I would say to a certain degree in terms of literature, Shug Avery, from The Color Purple kind of fits in there.
I'm not academic. I never read it.
Did they ever on Will and Grace? Did they ever establish Karen as bisexual?
I hated that show, so I have no idea.
I feel like it might have been heavily implied, so we can put her in the kind of implied category. As much as I think she's a good representation, there was one point where Rosa was dating a man and a woman at the same time.
This is on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So,
okay.
She doesn't usually fall into that category, but I was like, oh no, why did they do this?
Well, I mean, and I bring this up when I talk about tropes in general. Whenever you talk about a trope, not every single instance that a trope is used automatically makes it bad. It's just this sort of thing happens so much that it becomes a problem. So just because someone like Rosa, who I'm pretty sure someone will bring up again when we talk about more positive representation, just because she also fits this, at least in an instance, doesn't suddenly discredit the character. It just means, like, something to watch out for. It even shows up here. Other times it's usually worse.
And when you're talking about TV shows, you can look at a character over several seasons and in different relationships and talk about that. And then I think Helen in Kissing Jessica Stein also would fit into that category.
It has been a long time since I've seen that movie. And I know you hate it, so...
I don't like it. That is true. I do like Helen's character, though. She is probably my favorite part of that movie. I don't Jessica much, and I really don't like the guy that she ends up with.
Under this heading, there is a character I alluded to earlier, which is Captain Jack Harkness from Doctor Who.
Down. I'll let you cover that.
When I say alluded to earlier, under the omnisexual kind of thing, because while we only ever see him pair off with humans, we see him flirt, and it is made very clear that he has had relations with aliens and robots and if it is sentient, he will at least flirt with it. That's kind of his thing. Now, what is interesting about him, I think, is for as massive as his interests seem to be, that he is an unambiguously heroic character. Because usually for someone with as broad a taste as he has, like I said, you get into the hedonistic thing, but he's played for a little bit more of a sort of a Lothario type. And he's not necessarily praised for that, but it is a bit of a, there he goes again, and it just is with whoever else happens to be in the room. Like, I think the Doctor actually points out at something, it's like, stop it. All I did was say hello. From you, that's enough.
Yeah, he's a very well-loved character, so I never got the sense that it veered into villainous territory.
No, it didn't. And, like, as far as that specific aspect of the character, the show, even when he was on Torchwood, never judged him for that. The Torchwood especially would judge him for some of his actions and some of his history, but never for that.
This whole concept of, like, you can't like both genders at the same time. You can't really be, like, it. You can be this, and now you can be this, and you can date men, and now you're dating women, but you can't really like them both at the same time.
So this kind of gets into the whole notion of bisexual erasure. Which is a term that gets used in terms of entertainment, but is actually kind of rooted in medical and scientific history, because there were lots of sexuality studies where literally the studies and the people holding it would not categorize bisexual. They would determine, well, who are they with more, find them they're straight or they're gay. And there's literally decades worth of research that is, I don't want to say invalid, but is half-assed because the researchers literally erased it. Now, as it applies to entertainment, it's basically what you said. So I think like a really good recent example that gets brought up a lot is Piper from Orange is the New Black, because when she starts seeing a woman, the conversation is never, oh, she's bisexual. The conversation is, oh, she's gay now. Or she's gay again.
Yeah.
It's this idea of like there's two sides, and she can be on one and then she flips and she's on the other.
Because she starts out, well, I mean, obviously she starts out before the series begins with Alex.
Yeah.
And then she's with, I can't remember the character's name, her fiance, who's male, when the series starts.
Yep.
And then she goes back to Alex and other females. So but I don't think they ever define her as bisexual.
No, they keep referring to her as gay or straight. And that's always it's always dealt with as a binary.
Yeah, it really, and in general, they don't really address bisexuality much on the show.
I mean, a lot of shows,
as much as I would like.
No, I mean that especially considering that they've got ample room to do it, and they're dealing with enough, questionable stuff anyway. Like, there's no reason to avoid it. I see another name down there that I know has come up when I've brought it up in other videos, and that's Willow.
Yeah, I feel like she was with Oz, and I think that is a significant relationship. But I also get that there are a lot of people who have dated men in high school, and since then, have been with. I'm willing to say, I know a lot of people, it's really important to define her as a lesbian. And I'm not super particular about what label she gets. And I think if that's something that people can relate to and that what she went through, then if that's the label they want to put on her, that's fine. I think I think Oz is a very important relationship. Yeah. I think her, sort of like kissy fling with Xander also should be mentioned. But it is true that once she hit college, I don't think even in the comic books she ever dated men again.
Well, I mean, Kennedy's still alive, so she's still with her in the comics, at least as far as I got.
Yeah.
Not a Kennedy fan. But it is interesting with Willow that, because I'm kind of with you in that once she experienced that with Tara, she realized, oh, this is something else above and beyond what I had even with Oz, even though that relationship was important, that this is something else. And so I don't have a problem with her, because she does self-identify.
In terms as being defining her as a lesbian.
I certainly don't have a problem with her self-identifying. I do get some fans' frustration, though, in that it does, in some way, to say, well, she's gay, does in some way negate Oz or devalue him. And it would have been nice. I mean, given when it aired, it wasn't reasonable to expect this, but it would have been nice if there could have been some conversation along the way about, how firmly she feels that she is gay versus bisexual. But again, given when it aired, I'm not sure that was a conversation we could reasonably have ever expected to happen.
I also have her down as if it had been a different time and it had been a less repressed society, character-wise, would we just define them as lesbian? Or would they not have had any relationships with men?
Okay, so that's like Willow and...
the two women in Carol.
Okay, yeah.
Because again, that was a very repressed time, and I honestly, their relationships with men are not healthy or very functional, but I think they're very much in love with each other. And Celie on The Color Purple, I would define as lesbian, because again, very, very awful sexual relationship with a man. So, Whereas I would define Shug as bisexual. I wouldn't necessarily define Celie as bisexual.
I don't know if you have a category for this. What are your feelings on situations where it can, not that we're not necessarily the fiction itself says this, but it can be read as any same-sex encounters were sort of forced by circumstances. So for lack of a for lack of a better term, they're prison gay. They're together because there's no opposite gender available option. So that would come up in something like Oz, or it comes up in not...
It does come up. I feel like there's a bit of a
Orange
situation
is the New Black.
of that with one... Not all the characters. Definitely not all the characters.
No,
but there's a
some
couple
of them.
characters where I'm like, yeah.
Or the one that really frustrates me, when I talk about Wonder Woman, people will say, well, obviously she was with a woman when she was on the island. And I'm saying, yes, but ever since she met Steve Trevor, she's only ever been depicted as having any interest in men in the comics. Which to me reads, if she had any relationships with women prior to that, it's because that was literally her only option. Which is why it really frustrates me when people do, oh no, she's queer. I'm like, I feel like that's a stretch.
Yeah.
Until we get a post leaving the island canonical lesbian relationship out of her.
Oh, you know what we need to address is the Luke Cage characters too. Speaking of,
yeah. So season 2 of Luke Cage, Shades, and I forget the other guy.
Oh, I don't remember him either.
I don't either, but that one I actually felt was interesting because I feel like they tried to rationalize it as being basically prison gay. But then when they both got out, there was still something there.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of what made that a really interesting relationship between those two. Because they didn't expect these feelings to linger once they were out.
That also does a good job of really looking at it's about more than just sex.
Yes.
And the emotional connection and the romantic relationship, which I think is important, but also I think because there's this whole like hedonistic promiscuity aspect and trope going on, you lose the importance of the romance sometimes and the emotional connection. And sometimes, like, to me, it's very clear that Ruth and Iggy are in a relationship. And
so
it's very romantic.
Fried green tomatoes.
It's fried green tomatoes. And, like, it's more heavily implied in the book than in the movie, but to me, it's
hard to read as anything else, even in the movie.
Even in the movie, it's heavily implied, but I think more important than whatever they do in their bed at night is their love and their emotional connection. Their love for each other. And that's more clear. I mean, like, that is stated in a courtroom. Like, I love her. She's my best friend and I love her. And that, to me, is, like, pretty clear. But I get the frustration where it's not made explicit and it's like, oh, this is implied, but no one ever made this explicit. And that can feel like a form of erasure, too.
So that actually makes me think of something kind of interesting, which is that I cannot think, off the top of my head at least, of very many representations of a bisexual character where they were shown to have romantic interests in both men and women. Mm-hmm. The focus is pretty much always on the sexual attraction. And if there is a romantic interest, it's almost always heavily weighted, well, usually on the same sex side, when I'm thinking of it, with the implication being that, you know, the other is either, like with something like Carol, circumstance you kind of have to, or what have you. But I can't think of too many instances where characters are shown to be probably bi-romantic as well as bisexual.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, I think Iggy is a lesbian. I don't think she's bisexual. I think Ruth is probably bisexual in that relationship.
No, that's worth clarifying.
Yeah, to clarify that, because, yeah. In the implied category, I like to also add Eleanor from The Good Place.
I mean, like, she does keep pointing out how hot Tahani is. She points that out
and
a
I think
lot.
there's been a couple other comments about, like, women she finds attractive and stuff. And, like, I feel like it's pretty clearly implied.
I feel like
you have not been paying attention for 3 seasons if you're kind of like, what?
I think it's pretty.
You got the hots for some women there, don't you?
I think what I really like about it is how casual it is. Because she herself, and she's not like weird, like, oh, this is weird. She's just like, oh yeah. And I kind of just.
It's very.
I like how chill she is with it.
It is very in keeping with her character, and it's also kind of keeping with her character that she's like, I'm not gonna put this label on myself and be like,
Yep.
She's gonna say when she finds someone hot or whatever she's thinking, it's gonna come out of her mouth.
That's kind of who she is.
And I'm okay with it. So I get the frustration with it being implied, but some of the characters I'm putting into this, I'm like, I actually really like these roles and these characters. So
I mean, I think where implied, I was going to say where frustration is more legitimate. I don't want to invalidate anyone's frustration when they aren't quite getting the representation they feel they deserve. I'm never going to say that's not valid. But I feel like where I kind of personally get it more is when it feels like it's implied in a way that is just it's implying it for the sake of one of the bad reasons that we mentioned. It's implying it because it implies a hedonism, or it implies a promiscuity, or it implies
it's gonna just be a phase or something,
or it implies it's a phase which we haven't even gotten to yet, or it implies they're just messing with somebody, like
they're doing it like as a means to
an
end.
I think if you can if you imply it, but the nature of the implied bisexuality doesn't automatically feed into another negative trope, I don't think it's an inherently bad thing to imply but not make explicit. And I say that as someone who has called out things in the past for not being explicit. But, again, with something like Fried Green Tomatoes, like, okay, they never flat out say it, but how else do you read that?
How do you interpret them living together for years? And people are like, they should have made it more explicit. I'm like, they kiss at one point. And, like, the point with them, too, again, is not the sex. That movie is not. It is about female relationships and emotional connections. It's not at all about sex.
Yeah. And something like that, to have a sex scene would be distracting.
It would be like, what is it doing in this movie? A sex scene with any of the characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the criticism for that movie, and again, it was like an 89, 90 when it was made. It was
pretty solid for when it came out.
Yeah. There is, and kind of sort of related to this category is and this is a criticism of some people, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, they don't label themselves as bisexual, but it's pretty clear they're bisexual. And I would say, like, Sarah Lance on Legends has never said, hey, I'm bisexual. As far as I know, I haven't seen the current season.
She also doesn't have to, because she does explicitly have relationships with both genders.
It's there. Kalinda also falls into that category. So, yeah, it's pretty clear. Kalinda is having relationships with both men and women on The Good Wife. So,
and actually, that's worth pointing out. You don't have to say the word in order to make it clear that it's the case.
Though I understand why it's so important for some people to have that word used.
Well, here's what I would say. If they are using every word except that, which I think is the case in Orange is the New Black, because they're literally talking about a character's sexuality, and they use every word except bisexual, which is demonstrably what she is, that I feel you are well within your rights to call out. Mm-hmm. But with someone like Sarah Lance from Legends of Tomorrow, yes, they don't say the word bisexual, but they also don't say the word straight, and they don't say the word gay. They just just demonstrate through action. So the fact that they don't say that word, I think, is balanced out by the fact that, well, they're not labeling her with any other ones either. They're just showing you what she is, and if you don't know what to call that, then you're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about Kalinda, too. I'm like, yeah, she probably she might not have labeled herself as that, but it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
I don't think it could be. There are several scenes where I'm like, whoa, they put that on television, and I'm like, yep, yeah, it's clear. It's clear.
So you mentioned it's a phase.
So that has happened. Sex in the City is not fun when you talk about, like, especially bisexuality, because you have that horrible quote from Carrie. The, like, bisexuality is like I think it's like a stopover to Gay Town or something like that. It's cringeworthy.
Yeah. And, like,
The Samantha
I don't necessarily
episode is bad too.
I was gonna say I don't necessarily have a problem with somebody saying that if they were proven wrong by the end of that storyline, and she's not.
I also feel like that whole Marissa on the OC thing. I remember watching these episodes and being like, really, this is the least convincing thing ever. Like,
yeah,
neither one of these actresses are convincing me that they're in a real relationship, and I'm like, nope.
I feel like the it's a phase thing is something we don't see actively anymore, but will be tossed off as, like, a line. So, like, you won't see something like what we saw in Sex and the City where we actually see a character do this and then go, oh, that was a phase. But I think what we will still get is a character offhandedly going, oh, yeah, this happened.
Back in college.
I went through a phase, which is dismissive and frustrating, but, I mean, and I wish that would go away too, but I feel like that's slightly less egregious than actually demonstrating, look at this phase!
Having gone to an all-women's college, we did actually have terms for, we had lug, which is lesbian until graduation, and we had bug, which is bisexual until graduation. So... Yep, those lovely acronyms.
If it wasn't trademark, I would so do the more you know thing right across the screen right now.
So there's two acronyms for you. Yeah, it was, which again was like, I did not like those. I don't know, but.
Well, and the other thing is, I think what's frustrating is there is some legitimacy to the idea that someone experiments and it doesn't stick. Uh-huh. Now, calling it a phase still feels like the wrong way to put it, but, like, a level of experimentation is legitimate. I don't want to say, like, you can't depict that, because that is some people's reality. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like the majority of times it gets depicted in anything, it is done very much in a way that is, oh, look at this thing that was done briefly. It's
like it's something you tried on.
And it's never.
It doesn't. It feels shallow, kind of.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you have to kind of ask who is needing stronger representation right now. The people who tried it and then went back to effectively being straight, i.e., the best represented sexuality in entertainment, or the people who are in fact bisexual. I think they kind of needed a bit more. So I don't want to negate anyone who experimented, but at the same time, like, if we're saying who kind of needs the boost, it's this side.
So I think the other category, I've covered most of them in my notes.
So you've spent the last, I don't know, hour or so looking up your real life clan.
I didn't spend that long. Okay, maybe I did.
Now we're going to try and frame this through the depictions of these people. Although it is worth noting because a number of them have had movies or books or whatever made about them. And a lot of them you're like, oh, I didn't know. So, like, I feel like oftentimes the fact that some of these people are bisexual gets severely downplayed. Mm-hmm. So...
Places where it's downplayed, Frida Kahlo.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember if there was any implication of it in the movie.
I actually never got around to seeing that movie.
I haven't seen it in years and years. It was not really emphasized, if it was, to my knowledge. William Shakespeare.
Yeah. So
biggest example where it's like the best kept literary secret.
It's not, if you've actually read his work, it's not even a well-kept secret. I forget which sonnet it is.
It's several of the sonnets. It's not just one.
It's like, multiple of his famous love sonnets. Like, it's...
if you read them and you go, and you're like, okay, these are about a woman, and you're like, I don't quite understand these. And if you just go, these are about a man. Yeah. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, everything makes sense now. This makes sense.
There's several of them that are absolutely about men. And there have been...
The Golden Boy.
Oh, God, yeah. There have been a ton of depictions of Shakespeare throughout the years and a bunch of different things. And I can only think of one where his bisexuality is acknowledged. Funnily enough, in a Doctor Who episode.
You just kind of love...
I do. So yeah, there's a line in the Shakespeare Code where they're rushing off to go deal with what the problem is, so it's the 10th Doctor and Martha with Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. I have not seen this episode yet, so
no.
I'm not going
it's an okay episode. It's not amazing, but they're headed off, and Shakespeare has been flirting with Martha for most of this thing, calling her this enchanting dark lady and that sort of thing.
Because that is another...
Because that's also in the sonnets.
Sonnets is a dark lady, yes.
But the Doctor chastises him, look, you can flirt later, and Shakespeare looks at him and goes, is that a promise? And the Doctor goes, oh, about a dozen academics just punch the air.
Yes.
But, I think it's very telling
that... I will punch the air when I see that.
I think it's very telling that the only instance that I can think of, and, we're not Shakespeare scholars, but we both know Shakespeare decently. We
Thanks, Karen.
Minor flashback. We went to the same private school for 7th and 8th grade. We were required to do a 10-page paper on Shakespeare in 8th grade in order to graduate. But, yeah, that's the only instance I can think of, and that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got Freddie Mercury down?
Yes. So that is... He's debated in terms of a label for him.
That one actually might be an interesting one, because... So, and obviously we're talking about someone who has passed away, so obviously they're not around to give their own voice. Uh-huh. But...
What do you feel the depiction in Bohemian Rhapsody was? Do you feel it was that he was
the depiction
bisexual or that he was gay?
The depiction of Bohemian Rhapsody was consistent with what the general public understanding of him is, which is that he was a gay man. The film may have depicted him as, I would argue, biromantic. Because I think it could be argued that he was in love with, what's her name, Mary?
Mary Austin.
Mary Austin. But it did seem like his sexual leanings were very heavily towards men. Now...
I really... I like that you put biromantic on him, because I feel like there's almost... She was such an important role in his life and is such an important person and a muse, and I really don't like that. I feel like sometimes she's almost forgotten.
Yeah. And I think the movie depicted that fairly well, but it is worth pointing out that a fair number of people close to him, including members of his family, have said, since his passing, he wasn't gay. He was bisexual. But the public perception of him is generally as a gay man. Mm-hmm. And the film more or less held to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the idea that he's biromantic.
Yeah.
I think that's a good label for him because of the importance of his relationship, which was throughout his life, with Mary. So, but yes, I would say sexually, he's definitely more leaning towards men, especially, once he was into his 20s, like late 20s.
Or, again, that's certainly how it was depicted in the film. I notice you have Eleanor Roosevelt down there.
Well, I mean, there aren't a lot of... I don't know the recent depictions of her, but she's probably she's another one we should at least label as biromantic.
Yeah. And I think... I don't know how many movies have been made, like, strictly about her. I think she just has a tendency to turn up in other films.
Or
that are
about FDR.
That are about FDR or, things like that.
So I don't know how much...
or Annie, for some reason.
Oh, yeah, she is. Okay.
That's a weird movie.
And probably not going to depict her bisexuality in that one.
Probably not.
Probably not. So, yeah, and then you told me the rest but we would like to plug, we want this to happen. Please, somebody make a movie about Josephine Baker.
Holy crap, yes.
Yes.
And if you don't know who that is, Google is your friend. If you want to fully appreciate who that is, Google without safe search on is your friend. So, you're welcome.
Yeah. So that's our plug. Please make a movie about Josephine Baker. So we can now talk about like decent representation.
The good! All of this build up to get to the good ones.
Yeah. So
and some of these we have talked on because I know you've got Sarah Lance down there who we did touch on.
But I feel overall, so yes, let's talk about the two I've mentioned, which is Sarah Lance on Legends, who I just love her.
Sarah's great.
Love her relationship that she's in as of the second to last season.
Yeah, as of season 3, she's been in that relationship.
Yeah.
Although she had her one-off with John Constantine, who has yet to be depicted as bisexual.
Oh, I think he has been in the current season.
Okay. I haven't gotten through season 4, but as of season 3, he had not yet, and in his own show, was not depicted as bisexual, though he is in the comics. So if that gets confirmed in season 4 of Legends, that'll make me very happy. I have to catch up on it.
Yes, I'm excited for that. I'm excited for more Sarah. She's a lot of fun. She might slightly sometimes veer into a little... I think she's probably the most busy of any of the Legends in terms of...
Yeah, because she has her one-offs with, like, what Queen
Guinevere, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was some queen she messed with.
in one episode. There's been a couple guys here and there. So
she does slip into the promiscuity
but,
a little
bit. In season 3, they're establishing her in a, like, solid relationship.
She does. So, she settles down.
She settles down really nicely. I just love her. She's a great leader. A compelling story. Great story arc. Great character. And there's Rosa.
Rosa from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, yeah. Who, again, I think it was like so many people were delighted with the episode where she came out. And I love the actress who plays her, and
to my understanding, she herself is bisexual. So, like, they've been consulting her very closely whenever they want to tackle that with her character in the show. And they've been getting her input on that.
I just love Rosa as a character. She's just so dry and tough and wonderful. And
she is just so scary. So, like, if you have... Fun thing, because her coming out to the precinct, that clip is on YouTube, like, officially, from the Brooklyn Nine-Nine YouTube page. It's not, like, pirated or anything. And it's just her standing in front of them. I have something to say. I'm bisexual. You now have 60 seconds to ask me questions. Go.
Which I feel like a lot of people have felt, at one point or another that are, queer or gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgendered. At some point we're like, okay, fine, ask us questions. We know you have them.
Yeah,
like,
but she does it in
that moment.
She does it in the very Rosa way of basically saying, you go past 60 seconds and I'm going to throw something at your head.
Yes.
She doesn't have to say it. They just know it.
So yes. I love Rosa. Love Stephanie Beatrice who plays her. So happy. And
Ooh, I see a name I'm excited about down there.
well, I'm gonna go to Ambrose Spellman.
All right.
First, who I on the first season of Sabrina thought he was gay because he's specifically in a relationship with a man, but then later on he's depicted sort of having a relationship. Well, not a relationship, but a night with a woman, which is kind of orchestrated. So I guess some people might still put him in the gay category, but I think he's I'm guessing he's bisexual. Again, it's not clearly defined. I really enjoy Ambrose. He is, I mean, again, he's on one of those supernatural shows, but I would not define him as villainous. He's a really great supporting character on that show. And again, I mean, there's some good intersectional. You knew that was going to come out of my mouth because we said the word bisexual. So intersectional. You can keep that in there.
I'm going to.
Oh, I know.
I'm cutting my flubs. I'm keeping yours.
Thanks. The representation in media. I mean, and no, there's not enough. There is, and we're going to discuss, where we need more representation.
Yeah.
But there are some good examples happening, I think, with him, with Rosa, and just, there's some celebrities coming out where I'm like, yes.
There are, and like what the name you have down there, that I'm like, we have Daryl on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Daryl, he's so adorable.
He's really adorable, and White Josh, and they're my favorite relationship on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. We should say that we are only partway through season 2.
Yes, so like
we don't know what's going on now.
If things go pear-shaped, please don't tell us.
I want them together forever because they're so cute. And Daryl has a coming out song about bisexuality. What could be better?
It's great, and it again, it's nice there because it could have, and not to necessarily denigrate the Willow thing, but it is nice as a counterpoint to something like what happened with Willow, which was she starts a relationship with women and she goes, "Yeah, I'm gay," and Daryl starts a relationship with a man that is now
like, I am bisexual. I will now sing a whole song about it.
It's not even like, oh, I'm gay. He's like, no, I'm bi. I'm bi.
Hey.
And his boyfriend, who is gay, like knows he's bi, and cool. Yeah. It's so adorable. It's so good.
He's so dorky. I love him. Apparently, and we haven't gotten to this yet, Valencia is also bisexual.
Really?
Yep. Huh. So later on in the show.
I'll be curious to see how that is, because Valencia's kind of awful.
Well, so many people on the show. And
most of the characters on the show are kind of awful.
Speaking of villainous and more like awful characters, Daryl is by no means the worst or like even top 3-4 worst characters on that show.
No, that if you've never watched Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, it's great, but like it's a bit of a dark show in that the list of people who aren't kind of garbage fire human beings is the minority of the cast.
And does include, I really feel strongly, like, at the, like, good human beings, I would put White Josh.
White Josh is at the top. Daryl comes in under that. Then there's a big gap after that.
Yeah, Daryl means well, and, I mean, he's very socially awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think he's a pretty decent human being. He tries a little too hard is the main thing.
Yeah.
Those are some great examples I've talked about. And there's others I've heard about. I guess I had never gotten, so I had watched, Grey's Anatomy, the first 2 or 3 seasons. So there's a character, shade.
I've never seen it, so
and then I kind of lost interest in it. So I never saw Callie come out, but Callie comes out as bisexual, and I guess that actress is now playing another character that came out as bisexual recently and is herself bisexual. So awesomeness. I think her name is Sarah or Sarar. I think it might be pronounced Ramirez.
You know who I just remembered? that actually I need to vent about a bit now.
Okay, go for it.
Did you ever watch House?
Oh, I know what you're going
13.
to vent about. Oh, yeah, that's not as good.
No, it's not.
No,
all right.
not at all.
I used to love House.
She's also, side note, Olivia Wilde.
Yeah.
Also played Marissa's girlfriend on the OC. So she's...
Oh, boy. She's double dipping into the badness. Okay.
The like, not good bisexual representation.
So,
yeah,
there was a big fundamental problem with 13 as a character, which was that they gave her a very long list of traits, but never characterized her. So, she was bisexual, and she had a drug problem, and she had a terminal illness, and, they just kept piling on stuff that she never actually got to just be a character, because she was always just dealing with stuff
of her
identity. So she never just got to be. She never just got to exist. And then her sexuality specifically actually is really problematic because she, as a character, because she's a very unstable character, she is most stable when she's in a relationship with a guy. And she is at her least stable when she is in relationships with women. To be fair, I haven't gone back and rewatched these episodes in a long time, so if my memory of the timeline is slightly off, feel free to correct me. But to my memory, when she breaks up with, I forget his name, but when she breaks up with the guy who she was with, and she immediately starts seeing women again and doing drugs and partying, and it links her time with women to her other worst behaviors.
I saw a couple episodes that she was on, but I never consistently watched House like you did, so I never got the
I did all 8 seasons.
Full. I'm sorry.
No, for some of those, I'll take
sorry,
it.
Yeah. I have heard that character is pretty problematic, though.
So, okay, get that one off my chest. But I mean, it is. I feel like it is worth pointing out that neither of us did a number crunch for how frequently bisexual characters tend to come up.
It's gotten better. So, back in 2014, I guess there was only 8 bisexual women on broadcast, primetime TV, and 2 bisexual men, and it's dramatically gone up each year. That being said...
It's still disproportionately women, though, isn't it?
It's still disproportionately women, and if you look at, gays, lesbians, bisexuals, the majority of the depiction and the representation is still gay men.
Yeah. So we have a proportionality issue, both in terms
that doesn't reflect reality.
Yeah, both in terms of the gender of the bisexual characters and what percentage of the lesbian, gay, bisexual. Because I feel like in that conversation, transgender's over here because gender identity and sexual preference are not the same thing. So you kind of remove that from that clumping a little bit. That they're still underrepresented within non-heterosexual relationships.
Are definitely really underrepresented.
Yeah, it really kind of is just Daryl right now, isn't it?
And Ambrose. There's a couple others. Side note, and this is another disturbing trend that's been on a couple shows, and I haven't seen it so much, but I've read a couple things about it, is that bisexual men will be side characters that the main character is dating, and it freaks out the women that they're dating someone bisexual. And that's happened a couple times recently on shows. And so I'm just oh no.
Boy.
So we definitely need to make headway in terms of bisexual men. So it's a slow process. And I feel the bisexual erasure is still a major issue. And I have friends, who are bisexual and married or in a significant relationship with a man for years and years. And they, they feel
the world won't acknowledge them as bisexual.
It won't. And people, within our community are just no, you're not bisexual. Or, really? You are?
Yeah,
no, but you're married to a man. How can you be bisexual? Very easily.
I feel in some way that's part of what brought about the promiscuity trope. It's like you have to keep reaffirming, no, they like both. So you have to keep showing them. Otherwise you get like the Willow thing where, oh, well, now they're just with this, so now we'll just call them gay. Or we'll just call them straight. And so, like, in an odd way, the promiscuity thing, while not good and problematic, does kind of serve a function to continually reiterate that they do have an attraction to both.
I suppose.
And it's annoying that would even be necessary. That said, I feel like over the course of this conversation, a lot of the tropes that are the worst, we see fewer and fewer and fewer of as we get closer to the present. Like, because most of the examples that, like things like the femme fatale bisexual villain.
That's.
I can't remember the last time I saw that done, like, legitimately, like, unironically. I cannot remember the last time I've seen that.
Because there is definitely some irony in Barbara Keene.
Yeah, Barbara Keene is, I mean, Gotham is it is a dark show, but it's a camp show. It is a campy show. And I would not call Barbara Keene a straightforward depiction of anything, to be honest.
She's too much fun.
Yeah. But, like, I cannot remember the last time I saw it done legitimately. And even with things like the promiscuity, I feel like even that gets dialed back.
It has been slowly dialing back.
So I feel like things are overall trending in a better direction. But as you said, you know, we've still got a lot of issues in terms of proportionality and things like that. So there's absolute headway to be made. But I feel like most of the most egregious stuff,
we're doing better.
We
have
easing
a lot
off.
of work to do, and especially, like, I'd love to see more depictions of bisexual men, and not the ones we're getting where they're side characters and it's an issue with women. I would love more Ambroses and more Daryls. That would make me super happy.
God. The world needs more Daryl. I don't know Ambrose, but the world needs more Daryls, absolutely.
Yep.
So I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah.
So, thank you,
yeah,
sweetie.
You're welcome. I finally did this.
Been bugging her for a while about this. But I was excited to be able to. I mean, I like having you on anyways. But I was excited to be able to have you on for one of the representation discussions, and I didn't know if you would want to be that open with it, and I'm glad you did. I mean, I know you're not closeted, but obviously this is a bit like
my parents know.
It's doing this is a bit like getting on a bullhorn, though.
I know,
so.
it is strange, but yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's who I am, so you know.
So we're gonna wrap it up there, and whatever your folks' thoughts are on bisexual representation, the best, the worst, is it getting better? Whatever your thoughts are, and just always be respectful. I had an issue having to actually explain to someone, look, I don't care why you start doing personal attacks. I will clear out your comments. So don't do that. But if you can manage to not do that, drop your thoughts down in the comments, and let's talk about it. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do, because you can hit the like button, or subscribe, or support me on Patreon, or also none of it. You don't have to, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I just run the meetings. Sometimes with Liz.
I help.
And until next time, this council is adjourned. Thank you, baby.
And when I'm on, I run the meetings.